welcome back to my podcast. Oh my goodness, it feels like it's been forever since I've said those words, because it has been. If you haven't figured out already, I did take a little bit of a break from podcasting, but I'm really happy to be back now. I honestly didn't even intend for it to be that long of a break. Like, I really didn't intend for there to be a break, period. But after I got back from Africa, which we will be talking about today, I just was kind of like, I need some time to adjust. I need some time for me. And so I was really happy because I chose to take like a week or so off. And then after that, I got sick. And then after that, like every week, there was something that happened where I was like, I'm really just not ready to go back yet. Like, I don't know what it is, but I just need to take some time. And so I love the podcast. I love doing this. I was also just getting used to my senior year again, like getting back adjusted from going out and being like doing ministry to all of a sudden just being back, and like there was that culture shock. And so I'm really happy to be back now. I'm really happy to talk with you guys. I missed it. Some of you guys have been like, okay, when's the next podcast episode, whatever. And so today I just wanted to take some time to catch up with you guys. I want to talk about some things that God has been teaching me. I want to update you on what God did in my life when I went to Zimbabwe and just some of the cool stories. And I'm really hoping that we can just chat, like how we would chat if we were like getting coffee together, we were doing something, because that's really how I feel with you guys. Like, I feel like you guys are my friends, hearing you guys' DMs, like it's so fun. I remember I would hear people say that, like podcasters I would listen to, and I'm like, but how can you say that? But no, that's really how it is. I really do enjoy doing this, and I've missed you guys a lot. As you can tell, I'm not in my podcast studio. I'm actually literally on my bed right now. I'm in my room. That is where I'm filming today. So if you are like, oh my goodness, this sounds a little different, that might be why. Hopefully I'll be back in the podcast studio soon. But I'm here for now. I'm having to get the schedule worked out. I feel like that's the first thing I want to say. Like, there's so much in my life right now that I'm just trying to like get caught up on, if that makes sense. I feel like at the start of every school year, it takes a little bit to get into your rhythm, to get into your, like, you're adjusting back to things. That's definitely how I feel this year. Like, just, I know it's been a month. I know it's already September, so it's like, you should have already figured this stuff out. But I've really only been back in the States for like 2 weeks. And so I'm just trying to figure everything out, like, but yeah, just like that school rhythm. And also, I will say this, because I'm a senior in high school now, there is so much of a difference being a senior in high school, and like, I don't know how to describe it, except your schedule is different from all the other 3 years that you've been in high school. So like right now, I don't have as many classes, but I'm having to do scholarships and all that stuff. But I really want to start off today and just talk about Africa, talk about Zimbabwe, because I know there were a lot of people who were like, first of all, what in the world? Second of all, like, how did it go? Wanted to hear about it. So I really just want to talk about that today. I have found that it's been weird, because whenever I came back, like when my parents picked me up from the airport, I wanted to tell them all about it. I wanted to tell them like, oh my goodness, this is what happened. But since then, it's been kind of weird, because people have asked about it. They've wanted to know, and I wanted to tell them, but I just haven't been ready yet, if that makes sense. Like, I really needed some time to process, to think, just to like let it all soak in, the gravity of what happened, and just really enjoy the memories for myself for a minute. And so that's why I think too, I kind of put off the podcast, because I just wanted to process everything. Like, there were such close memories. I am such a loudmouth that I will like overshare everything, but these were such close memories that I really wanted to take the time and just like understand them, like enjoy them, experience them for me, like just hold them close and hold them dear to my heart. Like they were honestly just amazing. I loved it so much. But now that I'm back, I am so excited and I'm happy to share it with you guys. Like, I literally cannot wait. A lot of people were not expecting me to go there. I told the podcast family way before I told social media. Like, I pretty much, whenever I was flying out, I sent out like this like TikTok. I made a TikTok. I made some Instagram posts, and that's when people found out. They were like, what in the world? You're going to Africa? Like, are you moving there as a missionary? All that stuff. I think there were some people who were like curious, oh my goodness, is she feeling called to missions? And that's the thing, is that I love doing those mission trips. Like, I think God definitely put that in my heart now, to where I would love doing more short-term mission trips. Like, there's just a big place in my heart for that. But equally at the same time, like, I definitely don't feel called vocationally to do missions right now. I have such a big heart for doing ministry and doing missions where I'm at. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but I so much want to be a speaker. I want to speak to people about Jesus and about the Bible and what he showed me. I would love to speak to young people, like, and that's a season I'm in right now, which I also want to talk about, is just like, what do you do whenever you know what you feel like God's called you to, but how do you wait? How do you wait well? And so, like, that's how I feel called. But this experience, like, literally changed so much about me. So much of the ways I viewed things, viewed situations. So basically, I was one of 9 team members, I believe, and I knew none of them. Like, I was mutual friends with the leader of the group and knew her, and we had had a Zoom call with the whole team, so I'd seen their faces, but I truly knew none of them. And I would say that it was really hard the first few days because I'd never been across the world. I'd never been on a mission trip. There's only one other person who had never really been on a mission trip before. A lot of these other people had been on mission trips. Like, they knew kind of how it went. I didn't, and it was really weird because it was like I felt so alone in this place. I felt like, yes, there are nice faces who I'm getting to know, but I truly don't know, like, I don't know these people, and these people don't know me, and it was a kind of a nice escape from some of the stuff that I was already dealing with, like, at home, like the negative things that everyone deals with, like personal things. It was kind of nice to be just away for a second, to just take a break from the normal life, the normal challenges of everyday life, and to just be somewhere else. That was amazing. It set my year off amazingly. But the first few days, because none of us really knew each other, none of us understood each other yet, we just didn't have that time together yet, I really had to lean on God. I really had to ask him, okay, God, what is it that you want for me here? Why did you bring me here? There was a lot of comparison. Like, it was really hard because I'd look at other team members and I'd be like, man, like, God has so gifted them and I know why they're here, but why is he put me here? And what is he trying to do for me here? And I remember this specific time I was sitting, and it was so beautiful. I love Zimbabwe. I want to go back. It felt like fall, and I was just sitting outside, and I was like, God, why do you have me here? And he just so clearly, like, the Holy Spirit just spoke to me. I really feel like he told me, Claudia, I put you here not because you're like the others. And that's part of why you feel like alone, because you don't know them. They don't know you. It's like the first or second day I was there, I was fighting jet lag. He was like, listen, I understand that you feel different, but you're here because you are different, because you do have a different personality than all of these people. Now go do what I made you to do. Go do what you're passionate about. And I love soccer. I love it so much. And he just was like, Claudia, go play soccer with the kids. And I went and I played soccer with those kids, and it was just amazing how God used those doors to open. And, like, I really started to become friends with kids. The kids started, like, enjoying me. From that point on in the week, all of the kids, like, so much, they were like my friends. They were, like, attached to me. They loved me. They actually wanted to hear what I had to say because I'd spent the time with them. And it was just, like, it was amazing how God was like, okay, I know you feel alone right now. I know you feel like you have nobody else around you, but you know what? I'm here with you. I know you feel alone. I know you feel like questioning even why I put you here, but I'm going to use you in a specific way. And he just taught me so much, like, even when you feel alone, I can comfort you. And I really think that it's awesome when God puts you in places like that, where you're like, I have no one here to comfort me. God, why do you have me here? And I think that it's awesome because he uses those times to be like, no, I have you here because I want you to learn what it's like for me to comfort you. Because there are going to be times in life when you will not have another person to lean on for comfort. They're just not going to understand it. They're not going to get it. It's just going to be painful. It's just going to be hard, and you're not going to have someone else to lean on. But in those times, you have God, and you can lean on him, and you can understand him, and he can understand you. And it's just like, it's so amazing how that all works. The other thing is just like, man, it was awesome to see everyone there. So basically we put on these 2 like children's camps because I was there for 2 weeks. And it was awesome because I got to interact with the translators. They spoke a different language, and the translators spoke both languages. So it was awesome because I really became friends with some of the translators, and I asked some of the translators. I remember we had some really good conversation, and the translators, man, they gave like such good advice. And I remember this one thing, one of the guys there, his name was Stuart. So if you're watching this, I don't even know if he's watching this, but one of the translators there was named Stuart, and there was another translator there whose name was Blessed. And I was just talking with them. They were having conversation. Something that really stuck out to me is I was like, okay, like give me your best piece of love advice, whatever. And so they were talking to me. They were talking about how like dating and marriage was different in Zimbabwe and different things. But one thing that really stuck out is they were like, okay, ask God about it and listen to what he says. But then one of them said something, and this definitely was like, like a mic drop moment, is he was like, God created marriage. And so you have to realize that anything God created, he also will be able to fill it. Like anything that God created, he is able to fill. So if he wants you to have marriage, if he wants you to be married, then he will provide a God-sized solution for that. You just have to be patient. You just have to wait. And it just was like, it was so awesome. And so for those of you out there who like are like, oh my goodness, like, am I going to find anyone to marry me or whatever it is, however old you are, I just felt like that was something that I wanted to share with you guys, because I know there are people who ask me about that stuff all the time. And I just wanted to remind you, like, God made marriage. If he wants you to be married, then he has a solution for that. And he can, like, give you that solution whenever it's his timing. So we talked a lot about that. There were also lots of other conversations I had with different people. And I just really felt like God stretched me. He grew me. I was able to talk with some of these kids. Like, there were just some intense, insane God moments that happened that I'm forever grateful. Like, my perspective just broadened. And I truly believe that I got off the plane different from the person that I was whenever I got on it. Like, it just grew. I matured. But I know there were a lot of people who wanted to know, like, okay, how did you do this? How did this work out? All of that jazz. So I used a ministry organization called Global Encounters, and what I love about them is that unlike like YWAM and Circuit Riders or things like that, this is not like a months at a time long program. This is, the mission trip are typically short term. They're like 2 weeks long typically, and you can go, they have different locations that you can sign up for. There's an application process. You have to get accepted, have to raise your money, but then once you go, you can go for like a shorter period of time, which is 2 weeks. So if you're interested, then definitely check out their Instagram, which is Global Encounters. Also, like, the atmosphere, there is so much team building, and I just cannot talk well about it enough. Like, the leadership there is just impeccable. Like, I felt like everything was thought about. Every little detail was thought about. They do a good job not only being like, okay, here you go, here's what you need to do, but like training you so that you're able to do it. Like, I never once felt like, oh my goodness, I can't do this, because I felt like I had people there who were teaching me, who were alongside me. And yeah, so I would totally recommend that if that's something that you feel called to. That also lets you preview like the mission field, how it might be like. I would so recommend it. I would so say, like, that's something that God is also teaching me right now, is when God puts something on your heart, there's a time to wait, and then there's a time to act. And sometimes we err on the side of not acting when God really wants us to act. When God is saying, listen, I will bless you, start now. What is the difference between if you start when you're 18 or when you're 30? Why do you have to wait till then? Because age? Like, but I said don't let anyone look down on you because you're young. So there have been things in my life that I've tried to do prematurely, and that he's reminded me to wait, because that's my personality, is I do things too soon. But I know there are a lot of people, and they tend to just be like, oh, I'm too young, I'm in school, whatever. I think, and this is what I say, I tell people, I'm like, have a project, a heart project that you're working on while you're in school. Why? Because whenever you're in school, there are things you can't control. You can't control grades, you can't control what you're learning, and what happens is, whenever you're learning things that you hate, you begin to hate learning. But whenever you're like, no, I'm a learner, I'm going to be a lifelong learner, I'm going to choose that I'm going to learn things that I want to learn because I'm passionate about them, then what happens is after school, you're like, wait a second, like, I'm so excited, I get to work on something productive. And then in months or years to come, you get to see the reward of that, and it's just like, it's so cool. It's so awesome whenever you work on something you're passionate about, and then you actually get to do that thing, and doors start to open. And I'm just telling you guys, like, follow the leading that God's put in your heart. Please, definitely do that. But at the same time, like, if there's that thing that, as I'm talking about, that you're like, oh my goodness, I feel like I need to do that. I feel like I need to start writing that book. I feel like I need to start the business. I feel like I need to do whatever it is. Do it. Like, don't wait. Sometimes God just wants us to go, and he's going to direct us, and he's going to craft it, and he's going to help us refine it to what it needs to be, but he just wants us to go. And so, like, this is the part where I really want to talk with you guys just today, like, catching up about the things that I have been learning. And that is one of them, which is just like, you are not committed to perfection. You're committed to learning. So I'm going to start this thing. And that's even one of the things one of the leaders told me, like, in Zimbabwe. She was talking about, she was like, listen, anytime you start something new, the cost of starting something new is failure. You're going to fail at some point because you're not going to know this thing or that thing, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't start it. So if something happens and say you lose a little bit of money, or say it doesn't go as you planned, okay, that's the cost of starting something new. But you have to mentally prepare yourself for that, because a lot of times we're like, okay, if I start something, I have to be perfect at it to do it. That is not the case. Like, I'm telling you guys, oh my goodness, I struggle so much with, like, being like, oh my goodness, if I'm not perfect at it the first time, why am I doing this? Well, you're not going to be insanely talented at everything you try, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't continue. Like, that's where skill comes in. That's where learning comes in. And so that's the first thing I'm learning, is just like, I'm not committed from perfection. Even when it comes to friends, relationships, family, I'm not committed to being a perfect person, to never failing you, but I'm committed to learning from my mistakes. Whenever I fail, because it will happen, I'm going to fail, I don't have to be so hard on myself, because I sometimes am such a perfectionist, like, literally diaries of a perfectionist over here. One thing I've really been learning, that God's really been showing me, if you've grown up in the church, then you'll probably understand this. It is so easy to, like, look at the people who on testimony nights, like, they were like, I murdered 3 people, like, I got caught up in the sin, then God turned it around. And you look at them and you're like, yeah, that's awesome, like, God's grace totally extended to you, like, woohoo. But for the longest time in my life, I have not felt God's grace. I've grown up in the church. I've always really been a Christian since I was little, and yet I still haven't really felt God's grace, because in my mind, the little things, I either failed by saying, oh, the little things weren't that bad, so I don't really need God's grace. Or on the flip end, I would be like, oh, it's a little thing, so God doesn't really forgive that. He just looks at me and he's like, do better. Like, you should be perfect. And there are, like, these two contrasting ideas that are both very dangerous to be in. But that's something that I've really been feeling on a different level lately. And if you're like me, if you're a perfectionist, or maybe you're someone who's like, you know, I have a great testimony because it's God written, but I don't have anything really crazy that God saved me out of. I've never had this, like, intense sin struggle with a specific issue that, like, I've been trapped in for so long. Like, I've had trouble with sin, but it hasn't been in these, like, what the world would consider a massive way. God sees sin the same. He does. But I just want to remind you, like, sometimes it's easy, and I don't know how to describe it except whenever you look at athletes, right? If you see a 2-year-old and they're learning the sport and they're doing awful and they get like 5 goals scored on them, but they're doing their best, then this is how I would look at it. I would be like, oh, yay, like, that person, they're just doing their best and they're learning and they're getting better, so we should all be proud of them. Woohoo! And then there's a pro athlete over here, right? And say they miss a kick, or they have a bad shot and they didn't put that ball in the goal. Instead of saying, hey, that's okay, failure, that was meant to happen at some point, you're still trying your hardest, and look at how, like, good you are. Look at how, like, you're not missing all these goals, like, you're still playing a really good game. Instead of being like, good job, woohoo, to the pro athlete, I would see God as that coach who was like, oh, you missed the shot. And what I'm saying is, like, I would kind of see these Christians who were maybe newer to the faith, who didn't know as much, who didn't know, like, oh, that was even a sin. Like, they didn't even know that was a sin, but they're getting better, they're growing. And so I was like, oh, God gives them more grace because he knows that they don't know as much, or because he knows that they're just starting out. Like, God gives them more grace. But then I thought that he looked at me, and I'm not using I feel like that's a hard example because I'm not saying that I'm better than that other person, right? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, like in the example of the pro athlete, it's that the 2-year-old is only 2 years old. The pro athlete has been playing the sport longer. And so for me, it was like, I kind of felt like, okay, I've been playing the sport longer. That means like God is critiquing every single thing that I do. And for me, that was really hard because anytime I would slip up, anytime I would sin, I would really feel, and I think some of this comes from being an influencer, being in the eye, and I think it also comes in just being an example for Christ. When you're an example for Christ, when you're a Christ follower, there are going to be people who watch you way more closely than if you're not. And so I felt like that every time I messed up, I had God as this coach who was going like, shame on you. I can't believe you did that. Like, you could have gotten that. And holding me to a higher standard. And then I would see all of these people around me who would look at me and be like, you messed up. You're terrible. You're fake. You're not the person you said you were. How can you call yourself a Christian because you messed up? And would they really say that? No. But they would be like, oh, you're just immature. And that would be so like frustrating to me because I'm like, no, like I'm growing. I'm doing good. I slipped up here. And then I would get ticked and I'd be like, doesn't everybody have a slip up? Like, you make mistakes, I make mistakes. And like, how is it that I feel like God's just holding me to a higher standard? But he wasn't holding me to a higher standard. The whole time, God saw me the same way he saw that 2-year-old. He was looking at me and he was like, you know what? I'm so happy you're getting better. And the whole time, he wasn't telling the 2-year-old like, oh, it's okay that you're doing that because you don't know. No, he was saying, like, that's still wrong because you did it, but he gave them grace anyway, and he does the same thing for me. He says, yeah, that was wrong, but I'm going to give you grace anyway because I know you, because I love you, and he didn't just love them more than he loved me. Like, I think that it's hard, too, whenever you're the Christian who's maybe grown up in the church, to think, like, God doesn't love me as much as he loves the people who have, like, really been trapped in sin. Because if you look, and if you're watching the YouTube video, like, I'm about to do this thing with my hands, but if you look, like, at people who have sinned more, maybe they're in the negatives down here. Like, they have sinned and trapped in the sin struggle, more visible sin. And it looks like that now God loves them, like, this much, because maybe they were at negative 100, and God, like, forgave them, and so now they're at 0. So it looks like God loves them, like, this much. For people who've grown up in the church, visibly, it doesn't even look like it looks like we might be at negative 5. Now, is that true? No, because God sees all sin the same, and he sees the transgression as, like, equal. He sees the transgression as that is, like, you have all sinned, you've all turned away from me, but visually, for us, we compare ourselves to them. So whenever we see, oh, well, they had more to be forgiven, then that means he must love them more. God's like, no, I love you all the same. I see your sin all of the same. Like, I am putting you back. I'm restoring you to be with me. And I think that there is so much beauty when you do grow up in the church. Like, I've learned now, too, and I'm learning, like, how amazing it is to grow up in a family who loved God. To grow up in that. Yes, it means that I'm going to be analyzed and looked at with more of an eye, because some people just want to catch me doing the wrong thing because they want to think that it's not possible to live purely and upright. But that doesn't make my testimony any better than someone else. I just want you guys to know, who have grown up in the church, it is so easy to think that your testimony is less than just because you haven't seen God, like, save you out of this crazy, awful sin. And yet, there's so much power in your testimony. So please don't ever let it, like, stop you from sharing. Because I'll tell you right now, yes, I haven't had God, like, I haven't done anything, like, so awful. I haven't had, like, God come down from heaven and be like, Claudia, turn to me. I think those testimonies are beautiful when they're like that. And I think I've come to learn that my testimony is beautiful too. But what I have seen is I've seen God move and work in my life in ways that are undescribable. And what my testimony has and what it's rich in is something that some other testimonies are not rich in. Now, their testimonies are rich in things that my testimony isn't as rich in. But do not get it wrong. Your testimony is going to have something as God builds it that other people don't have. So I would challenge you, pray that prayer of God, what have you put in my testimony to share to other people? And I would challenge you to say, God, would you build my testimony? Would you build me a story in my life that inspires other people? And maybe it's not in your salvation story. Maybe the testimony that you get to share that God does something really crazy is how he leads you to your spouse, or how he works to give you the job that you knew you were called to do, or how he provided that thing, he provided that house, maybe how he restored your life in some way. Whatever it is, your testimony is powerful. It is so powerful. Okay, so something else I've been learning, and this kind of came to me through a sermon prep I was doing. I literally preached on like Wednesday. I preached this little sermon to some of the people at my school, some of like the middle school age kids, and I was talking about love, and I had this visual of a cup like being a person and water being love. Like everyone wants to be filled with love completely, right? And so I had this visual of this cup, and I had people like common things that people go to for love. So like boyfriend or girlfriend or friends or whatever it was. And I had them pour 100% of that cup's water into like the human cup. I don't know if this makes any sense. But basically what I'm saying is, like for instance, the friendship cup. They poured all of their water into the cup of the human, like my cup. Poured all of their water in, 100% of the water. And it only made it go like halfway. And I poured 100% of the boyfriend love into that little cup, and it still didn't fill the cup all the way, right? And so what I was telling them is, a lot of times we struggle because if we're in a relationship, if we're in a friendship, we expect that person for their love to fill us to the top, to fill that hole in our heart, right? But whenever it doesn't, it's hard for us because we're like, wait a minute, like they're just not doing enough, like they just need to put in more effort. When in reality, I think that there are a lot of times that friend or that boyfriend or that girlfriend has given all of the love they have to give. But it's still not enough to fill you. Because God gave you with a heart that's big enough to fully experience his love. But humans don't have love big enough to fill your heart. So whenever you go and you chase towards humans, you go and you're like, okay, like this human is going to fill me up, and they don't, then we have a tendency to blame it on that person. But that's not, like, they can't do that. Like, you're holding them to a standard of something that they cannot do. They cannot give you that love. They cannot help you in that way because your heart was made to be filled with God's love. And so whenever you fill yourself with God's love, with his acceptance. Y'all, why was that word so hard for me to say? Acceptance. When you fill your heart with that, you go to God and you're like, okay, God, you love me, you accept me, I am worthy because you love me. And then you go and like that's where you get your worth from. And then you go to someone else and that boyfriend is like, hey, I really love you. Like, I accept you, whatever. Then you're like, thanks, that makes me feel really good. But that's not where I'm getting my worth from because God already said that I was loved and worthy. So whether you love me or not, even if that boyfriend breaks up with you, you're like, okay, that hurts, but I'm still loved and I'm still worthy because my heart is already full with that. And on top of that, you cannot expect yourself to love other people well if you don't already have a heart that's filled up with God's love. Because whenever you're chasing after humans' praise and approval, and they're giving you like all of this praise and approval, but it really doesn't fill your heart, then that's all the love that you have to go off of. You can't show people love when your heart isn't full of love already. But whenever you go to God, then he gives you so much love that it like overflows. And so that's something else that I've just like a really cool thought that I've been listening to, like, and it's just, it's really been like freeing for me. And then also like journaling for me. I've been journaling so much more, and that is a tip that I will give you guys. Like, I've been journaling a lot more, and I find that especially in seasons of spiritual warfare, in seasons where it's hard, in seasons where like high school is a stressful time. If you were in high school and you're not journaling, please journal. There's so much insecurity, there's so much drama going around. Like, please journal. If you're in college, there is more than enough confusion. Like, you're trying to figure out what to do with your life. You're trying to figure out, like, are those people friends or foes? Like, and if you're not, like, if you're a mom, if you're a dad, like, please journal your thoughts out. Because I am learning that when you journal, you're able to mentally process things almost like if you were able to have a conversation with a person, except you're able to give all of it out. And there's sometimes when we're talking to people, we're not able to tell somebody everything of what we're thinking because it's like a little bit too, like, you can't give them the whole version. You can't give them the whole version of what you're thinking or feeling because that's going to hurt somebody else's feelings. But when you journal it out, you can. And I'm finding that whenever I just journal, I started journaling like a few years ago, just whenever I would go through something emotional. It started out with like a half of a page. Now I will journal like once every few days, every day sometimes. This week it's been an everyday type of week, you know what I'm saying? But it's like 2 pages, like a day, that I just have to journal out my thoughts because some of those journal entries are going to be like, whoa, God, you're so good. Like, I was so mad whenever I started this journal entry, but then I realized that I wasn't really mad at you. I was feeling something else, and that's what was going on. And then there are other times when I'm like, you know what, God, I'm really hurting, and I am frustrated at you, and I don't know how this is going to get better. So, like, there are some journal entries that I just have unfinished because I'm like, I really don't know how to end this except that I'm hurting right now. And then a week later, a few weeks later, maybe it's a year later, it's been awesome to see how God has worked in those situations to where I'm like, you know what? He brought closure. He gave me peace. And the cool thing is sometimes we're afraid to write those things down or to talk about it because we're like, we don't want God to hear us. We don't want God to hear us say that, like, this is hard or that we feel frustrated at him or that we almost feel like he's wronged us, which he never does. But whenever we keep that in, then all it does is it allows it to fester in the hidden. God already knows you feel that way about him. God already knows that you're struggling. Sometimes when you say it out loud, because I also like will record myself, do voice memos sometimes, like while I'm driving or something to process things. When you say it out loud, then all of a sudden you're able to identify it and you're able to address the issue. Whereas whenever you keep it inside and you don't process your emotions, and this is why processing your emotions is really important, there are times that I have been embittered towards God that I didn't even realize I was embittered towards God. So I started pulling a thread of pain, and I was like, wait, I've been blaming this on God, and it wasn't even God's fault. And so I'm telling you, like, journaling, talking to people, like, it truly will, like, change your life. And, like, something else I've been asking myself recently is, I think sometimes our default, especially as Christians, when something bad happens, is to immediately blame it on God, right? Because in our minds, God controls every little thing. So God is the giver of blessings, but then when something bad happens, like, we're first to blame God when something painful, because that's who we're always focusing on. That's who we give our life to. So we have this expectation that he's going to protect us and he's going to give us blessing and he's going to give us good things. So when things happen that hurt us, our first go-to is like, oh, I'm blaming God. Like, God, why would you do this? Like, God, I'm so mad that you would allow this to happen. And what I've been doing is whenever I feel myself think, I'm so mad at God, I've begun to ask myself, whoa, stop. Are you really mad at God? Or are you sad? Are you sad that, because maybe it's, I'm sad because this person did this. Or I'm angry because I felt this way. Or this environment made me feel anxious. Or the consequences of my own actions or my sin has bred this. And it really wasn't God's fault, but I just wanted someone to blame because I didn't want to blame myself. Or I didn't want to blame that person. Or it was just easier to blame God because there was nobody to blame. So I just blamed it on God. And can I just tell you, like, there is nothing that you should truly ever be angry at God at. Now, hold on. I'm not saying you can't feel angry. David felt angry at God. David was hurt by God. But whenever you look at God and what he does, there are times, I think of Job, right? He did all that to Job. He allowed all of that to happen to Job. He didn't do it. He allowed all that to happen to Job. But at the end, he was like, but don't I have the right to do this? Because I gave you life, because I made this earth. Like, my ways are so above your ways that you can't even understand what I'm doing. And Job was like, yeah, you're right. Like, yeah, exactly. So putting my situation into that perspective of like, why am I actually feeling hurt? And then also realizing that God's default is not trying to hurt me. I think that there have been times when I have had this default of God trying to hurt me because of my past trauma or experiences of thinking like everyone's always out to get me. That is a victim mindset. God is not just out to get me. God's goal is not to be like, okay, how much can I hurt you? How much can I make this hurt? Or whatever it is. That is not God's plan. That is not God's goal. His goal is saying, okay, I want to put you through this trial so you can be better. He wants you to be better. He wants you to grow. That's his plan. He wants you to have a better life and to experience things better. He wants to prepare you for the season you're about to enter into. And whenever you start to shift your mindset from, oh, God just hates me and wants to put me through this, and you start going, whoa, 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 look at all the things he's done for me. Like, start practicing gratitude. I promise it'll also change things. Look at all these things he's done for me, A. B, look at the fact that, like, he actually wants to do these things for me. He actually cares for me. And he wants to help me. He wants to help me through the mud. Half of the time, we blame God for something that is sin's consequence. We blame God for things that are the consequences of our own actions. Or we blame God for something demonic is doing in our lives. We blame God for temptation when he doesn't tempt. And it's like, stop blaming God and start beginning to go, okay, God isn't the person to blame here. And even if it was him who did it, guess what? He still didn't do anything wrong, because God doesn't do anything wrong. God can't do anything wrong. Like, he is doing this for a reason, and his intention is nothing but good. God doesn't have evil intention. God doesn't have wicked intention. He wants to help you. And I don't know. I think that those things just, like, low-key, I felt like we just had a therapy session here a little bit. But it's so good. Like, I feel like that's honestly, like, a really good note to end on, just because, man, it just gives you, like, a lot to think about. And I want to encourage you, journal some, ask yourself, what are the things that I've been putting on God that aren't really his actions? I know that this episode was definitely, like, a hodgepodge episode. We talked about, like, a lot of things, a lot of different variety. I really hope that one of them spoke to you, like it's spoken to me. And if they did, I would really love for you to DM me to tell me, like, oh my goodness, this one really spoke to me. I would love it if you took a screenshot of yourself listening to this podcast, or what you're doing while you're listening to this podcast, share it on your story, tag me, because then I would love to repost that on my story. So just share this podcast for someone else that you think might need to hear it, and really just let some of these words soak into you this week. Ask yourself, what is it that I really need to process that maybe isn't God's fault? Or what is it that I need to just put into his hands and trust him with? And I believe that he's going to help you this week. So I am so happy that I got to spend this time with you guys. Follow the No Haters Club podcast on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube, Spotify. Gonna be trying to come back every Tuesday with some episodes. Have some guests that I think you guys will really like seeing. And I hope you have a fantastic week. Join the No Haters Club by hitting that subscribe button or the follow button, whether you're listening on Spotify or whatever it is. I cannot wait to see you guys next week. Goodbye.